They say, when a woman chooses love over luxury, the village prepares her grave. But Precious didn't die. She planted her tears in the dust and found gold beneath it. They laughed the day she said yes to a cripple. Past her wheelchair, one woman hissed, "Nah, that one go feed you." Another spat, "Even beggars get sense pass you." Even her mother turned her face away. "Precious, this is not the life I prayed for you." But the gods, they were watching. And that's why the elders say, never spit on a seed, you don't know what tree it will become. You see this house? Just months ago, the girl inside it slept beside leaking roofs and borrowed firewood. No. The wind kneels at her gates. This is not just a love story. It's the tale of a man with no legs, and the woman who saw wings where others saw wheels. So listen well, family. In the heart of our land, there was a small village called Amiri. It was a place where everybody was known, and everyone knew each other's business. People here cared much about what others thought. If you were rich, you were respected. If you were poor, people looked down on you. In Amiri lived a young woman named Precious. Precious was very kind and humble. She was quiet, too, not one to shout or gossip in the market. Because of this, and because her family was poor, many people mocked her. They said she was too quiet, too simple. They said no good man would want a poor, quiet girl like her. Then there was Pastor Benson. He was a man of God, but unlike other pastors, he was crippled. He used a simple wooden wheelchair to move around. Pastor Benson was always wise and spoke softly. He never begged for money, even though he wore dusty, worn-out clothes. He lived in a small hut on the edge of the village. People respected his words, but many pitied him or even looked down on him because of his legs. One hot market day, Precious was selling her mother's few vegetables. The market was crowded and noisy. Suddenly, some market women, known for their loud mouths and unkind ways, bumped into Pastor Benson's wheelchair. He was trying to pass, but they pretended not to see him. Instead, they laughed and threw dirt from their yams, which landed on his dusty clothes. Pastor Benson didn't say a word. He just tried to clean himself quietly, his head bowed. Precious saw this. Her heart felt heavy. She quickly left her small stall, without caring what her mother would say. She walked to Pastor Benson and, without a word, took a clean piece of cloth from her basket and gently wiped the dirt from his clothes. Pastor Benson looked up at her. His eyes were deep and kind. He smiled, a soft, warm smile that reached his eyes. Pastor Benson said, "My lady," he said, his voice like calm water. "To those who see ash, I see gold. To those who mock your path, may they walk it blind." Precious didn't fully understand his words then, but she felt a strange peace when he spoke. The market women who had laughed now looked at her strangely. She just smiled faintly and went back to her stall. This act of kindness, small as it was, began to change things. Not for the village's view of her, but in her own heart. She had seen something beyond the dust and the pity. She had seen a good heart. News travels fast in a small village, like fire in dry grass. People saw how Precious helped Pastor Benson. Some said she was kind, but most just laughed harder. They said she was so poor, she was now looking for a husband even among the crippled. Then came Tony. Tony was a rich young man from the next village. His father had many businesses, and Tony himself drove a shiny car, a big symbol of wealth. He was handsome, tall, and spoke with confidence. Every girl in Amiri wished to be his wife. One day, Tony came to the market. He saw Precious, quiet and graceful, despite her simple clothes. He walked straight to her stall and began to flirt with her, right there in front of everyone. Tony said loudly, "Precious, my flower, why do you hide your beauty in this dusty place? My home has a garden where you would shine." The village women gasped and whispered. They pushed Precious, telling her to agree. A village woman pushed, "Precious, are you deaf? Tony, the son of Chief Okafor, is talking to you." Another chimed in, "Leave that cripple pastor. This is your chance for a good life." Precious felt shy, but she knew Tony was only pretending for show. Later that day, he met her alone, away from the market. His words changed. Tony whispered, sneering, "Look, Precious, don't be foolish. I can give you a fine life. But you must forget about that pastor wheelchair. What kind of future can a woman have with a man who can't even stand on his own 2 feet?" He laughed, a cold, unkind laugh. Precious's heart sank. She saw the truth of him then. He wanted to use her to look good, but he had no real respect. Meanwhile, Pastor Benson visited Precious's family hut. He didn't come often, but when he did, his presence brought a calm silence. He sat in his wheelchair, humble as ever. One evening, he spoke to Precious's parents, and then he turned to Precious. Pastor Benson, gentle and sincere, asked, "Precious, I have no legs, but I walk with the Most High. My steps are guided by faith. I have no fine house, but my spirit lives in a palace of peace. Will you walk with me on this path? Will you be my wife?" Precious's mother gasped. Her father looked away, ashamed. How could a cripple, a poor one at that, ask for their daughter's hand when Tony, the rich one, was offering? But Precious looked at Pastor Benson. She saw the kindness in his eyes, the wisdom in his smile. She remembered how he spoke to her that day in the market, how he saw gold where others saw ash. She remembered Tony's cold laugh. She took a deep breath. Precious said softly, but firmly, "Yes, Pastor Benson. I will walk with you." The village erupted. News spread like wildfire. Laughter, insults, and gossip filled every compound. A village elder, shaking his head, exclaimed, "Precious has truly lost her mind. What is she thinking? Marrying a man who has nothing, a man who cannot even work his farm." Precious's mother, with tears in her eyes, cried, "Precious, you have shamed me. You have shamed this family. How will I show my face in the market?" Precious felt the pain of her mother's words, the sting of the villagers' laughter. She felt tears gather in her eyes. Pastor Benson just looked at her, then at the villagers. Pastor Benson said calmly, "Let them laugh. Even the rain must wait for its time." His words were like a shield around her. Precious held her head high, though her heart was heavy. She had made her choice. Marriage to Pastor Benson was not easy. Just as everyone had said, hardships began immediately. They moved to a tiny mud house on the very outskirts of Amiri. It was so small, only one room, and the roof leaked when it rained. It was far from the village well, far from the market. Every morning, Precious woke before the sun. She would fetch water from a distant stream, carrying the heavy pot on her head, her back aching. Then she would gather firewood from the bush, her hands getting cuts and thorns. She sold what little she could in the market to buy food for them. Her clothes became more worn, her body thinner from the hard work and poor food. Pastor Benson prayed daily. He studied his old, worn Bible. He would speak words of comfort to Precious, telling her about God's plan, about patience, about faith. They prayed together every morning and every night. His words were always calm, always full of hope, even when their stomachs rumbled with hunger. But for Precious, the doubt began to grow. Little by little, it ate at her heart like a tiny worm. One night, the moon was full and bright. Precious sat outside their tiny mud house, staring at the sky. Tears rolled down her face, silently. Precious whispered to herself, looking at the moon, "Lord, did I make a mistake? Did I choose suffering? My mother, the villagers, were they right?" She remembered Tony's fine clothes, his shiny car, and the promise of an easy life. She remembered her own dreams of comfort and respect. Now, she had none of those things. All she had was a small hut, hard work, and a husband who could not even walk. Pastor Benson seemed to hear her thoughts, even though he was inside. He came out, moving his wheelchair slowly. He smiled his gentle smile. Pastor Benson said, "The night before sunrise is always the darkest, my dear Precious. Hold on. The morning will come." His words brought a small comfort, but the shame in the village was real. Whenever Precious went to the market, the women would whisper and point. One village woman said loudly, "Look at her. See how thin she is. See her clothes." She refused a rich man for a crippled beggar. Tony walked past, laughing loudly with his friends. "Look at my flower! Still smelling like dirt. I told you, some people love suffering." Their words stung. Precious would quickly buy what she needed and run back to her hut, tears burning her eyes. Even children would sometimes follow her, shouting, "Pastor Wheelchair's wife." The weight of their scorn was heavy. Precious continued to work, to pray, to care for Pastor Benson. But deep inside, the questions remained. Had she truly chosen faith? Or had she just chosen a path of endless pain and mockery? She often wondered if the gold beneath the dust Pastor Benson spoke of was just a dream, a comforting lie. Life went on, quiet and hard, in the small mud hut. Precious had learned to live with the mockery, though it still hurt. She just kept her head down, focusing on her duties, and finding strength in Pastor Benson's unwavering faith. Then, one night, everything changed. It was 3 a.m. The village was fast asleep, covered in the deep darkness of the night. Precious was suddenly woken by a loud, insistent honking sound coming from outside their tiny mud house. It wasn't a bicycle horn, or a truck. It was the deep, powerful sound of many big cars. She sat up, startled. Pastor Benson was already awake, sitting calmly in his wheelchair. Pastor Benson said quietly, his voice full of a strange purpose, "Get dressed, Precious. We're going to the city." Precious blinked. The city? What was he talking about? She was confused, but she quickly put on a simple wrapper. As she stepped out of the hut, she gasped. Outside, in the dark, stood a convoy of black SUVs. Their headlights were blinding, cutting through the thick night like powerful swords. The cars were long and shiny, looking completely out of place in their dusty village. Men in crisp, dark suits with earpieces stepped out of the lead SUV. They looked strong, serious, like bodyguards or government officials. One of the men, taller than the others, walked towards them. He spoke softly, but his voice carried authority. The man whispered respectfully, "We've been sent by the board, Pastor. Everything is ready." Precious stared in complete disbelief. She clutched her simple wrapper tight around her body. Her mind raced. Who were these people? What board? And why were they here, for Pastor Benson? Precious asked, her voice trembling slightly, "Who are you people?" The man bowed slightly to her, a gesture of deep respect. "Madam, your husband is not who you think." Before Precious could ask more questions, they were gently guided into one of the luxurious SUVs. The seats were soft leather, the inside cool and quiet. Pastor Benson sat beside her, still calm, still smiling faintly. He pulled out a sleek, modern phone from his pocket, a phone Precious had never seen before. He made a call. Pastor Benson, into the phone, his voice now strong and commanding, very different from his usual gentle tone, "Yes. Activate the foundation. Prepare the sanctuary. And tell media team. We'll be late to the press briefing." Precious listened, wide-eyed. Foundation. Sanctuary. Press briefing. Media team. Her mind reeled. This was not the poor, crippled pastor she knew. The SUVs sped away from the village, leaving the dust and darkness behind. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with colors, they arrived in a big, bustling city of Port Harcourt. Tall buildings, made of glass and steel, reflected the morning light. The streets were filled with expensive cars. The convoy finally turned down a tree-lined street. The gates of a massive estate opened slowly, silently. It was like entering a different world. Inside, a beautiful fountain shaped like praying hands stood in a grand garden. Security guards in neat uniforms saluted as they passed. They stopped in front of a huge, modern mansion. Staff, dressed in smart uniforms, waited at the door. As Precious stepped out, looking around in a daze, they all bowed slightly. The staff said in unison, "Welcome, madam." Precious walked into the mansion, her heart pounding. The floors were shiny marble, the walls decorated with expensive art. Pastor Benson, still in his wheelchair, moved with an air of authority through the grand hallways. He led her to a large, bright home office. He moved to a sleek leather chair behind a grand desk. As he sat down, Precious saw a wall of large screens behind him. These screens showed live feeds of huge, modern churches. One screen said, "Grace Tabernacle Ministries, Canada," another Grace Tabernacle Ministries, Abuja, and another Grace Tabernacle Ministries, Port Harcourt. Precious gasped. Her eyes moved to the framed photos on the wall. There he was, Pastor Benson, but looking powerful and grand, sitting in a different, more advanced wheelchair beside governors, international pastors, even presidents. And on a large, shining plaque, she read, "Founder, Grace Tabernacle Ministries Worldwide." She stared at the man sitting before her, the man she married. He was not just Pastor Benson, the crippled man from Amiri. He was a global leader, a man of immense power and wealth, hidden all this time. The pastor with no legs had a kingdom of gold. Precious stood there, lost for words. The shock was too much. The man she had known as a humble, poor cripple was actually a giant, a very important person with a whole empire. She looked around the luxurious office, at the screens showing his ministries all over the world. It was unbelievable. Then, a well-dressed personal assistant came into the office. He carried a thick folder and smiled warmly at Precious. The personal assistant said respectfully, "Madam, these are yours now." He opened the folder to reveal many legal papers. They were property deeds, deeds for huge estates in places like Lekki and Maitama, the richest areas in Lagos and Abuja, and a beautiful beach house in faraway Ghana. Precious's hands trembled as she touched the papers. Her whole life, she had lived in a small, leaky mud hut. Now, she owned mansions. Another man, who looked like a media specialist, stepped forward. The media specialist explained, "Madam, you'll be announced as the First Lady of the Ministry during the live broadcast this morning. We've already arranged everything. We'll get you styled, press-ready, looking beautiful for the world to see." They showed her to a large dressing room, filled with fine clothes and sparkling jewels. A team of stylists and makeup artists waited. They began to transform her. Precious sat on a soft chair, looking at her reflection. They put a fine, expensive lace wrapper on her, so different from her old, faded ones. They styled her hair, adding beads and gentle coils. She stared at the woman in the mirror. It was her, Precious, but also not her. This woman was elegant, rich, and powerful. Tears, silent and hot, rolled down her cheeks. They were tears of shock, of wonder, but also of a deep question in her heart. Just then, Pastor Benson entered the room, still in his wheelchair, but looking more majestic than she had ever seen him. He looked at her, his eyes full of love and understanding. Pastor Benson's voice was soft but clear as he said, "Precious, you chose me when I had nothing to show. When the world laughed, you saw a man, not a cripple. You saw faith, not poverty." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "Now, my dear wife, will you use what we have to show love to others, to lift those who are like you once were? Or will you use it to show off to the very people who mocked us?" His question was like a cool stream washing over her confused mind. Precious looked at her transformed self in the mirror. She thought of the villagers who had scorned her, of Tony's cruel laughter. She could use this wealth, this power, to make them bow, to make them regret. She could show off her riches, her new status. But then she remembered Pastor Benson's words from long ago, "To those who see ash, I see gold." She remembered his unwavering faith, his gentle strength. She remembered the hidden gold in his heart, the real treasure. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, her gaze clear and strong. Precious whispered, but with great certainty, "Let's go back, Pastor. Not to prove them wrong, but to lift those who are like me." A beautiful smile spread across Pastor Benson's face. He nodded slowly, proudly. Pastor Benson replied, "That, my dear Precious, that is the kind of wife heaven gives a throne." And so, the morning unfolded, but not as the world expected. Precious and Pastor Benson did not appear at the big press briefing in the city. Instead, the news that spread was even more astonishing. The very next day, a billionaire convoy of sleek black SUVs, even grander than the one that came for them, returned to Amiri village. Dust rose as they pulled up, slowly, through the main street. The entire village stopped. Whispers rose like smoke. Tony, who was showing off his new phone in the market, saw the convoy. His jaw dropped. He dropped his expensive phone right into the dusty ground. The market women, who had mocked Precious so much, shielded their eyes from the glare of the cars, their mouths hanging open. The door of the lead SUV opened. Everyone leaned forward to see who would step out. It was Precious. But she was not wearing the fine lace wrapper she had been given. She wore simple, clean clothes, like the one she used to wear, but of good quality. She looked humble, but her face glowed with peace and quiet strength. Behind her, Pastor Benson emerged in a motorized, sleek wheelchair, his presence commanding respect. Precious didn't look at Tony. She didn't look at the mocking women. She looked straight ahead. Soon, the transformation began. Precious, as the First Lady of the Grace Tabernacle Ministries worldwide, used their resources to transform Amiri. She oversaw the rebuilding of the old, broken-down local school. New classrooms were built, with desks and books, and good teachers were hired. She started a fund to help women in the village learn new skills: tailoring, baking, weaving. They learned how to make things to sell, so they could earn their own money and stand tall. She sponsored young girls from poor families to go to university, something unheard of in Amiri. The village changed. Hope bloomed where despair had once grown. The laughter that now filled the air was not of mockery, but of joy and gratitude. One day, a famous news reporter came to Amiri. She wanted to interview Precious, the woman who had brought such change. They sat under the very mango tree where Pastor Benson had helped her pick up tomatoes so long ago. The news reporter asked, holding her microphone, "Madam Precious, this transformation is amazing. How did this all begin?" Precious smiled. She looked at Pastor Benson, who sat nearby, watching her with love and pride in his eyes. Precious's voice, clear and full of grace, replied, "It began the day I chose faith over fashion, and love over luxury." The reporter looked at Pastor Benson, then back at Precious, understanding dawning in her eyes. The story was clear. And that's why the elders say, "He who turns away from dust may never know where diamonds hide." What's one choice that changed your life? Share your wisdom in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, let us know by hitting the like button, and join our family of story lovers for more inspiring African tales by subscribing to Dee's AfriTales TV. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next tale of hidden greatness.